We had a lot of discussions about the format. So how large can we go and how large do we want to go? Because obviously the larger the format, the more data we create.
Dark was the very first Netflix show in Germany.
Initial estimates were 4 terabytes per day. In the end, we ended up with 700 terabytes.
The first thing you do is to read the script and make some notes about the things going on in a film or a show. In case of Dark, there were like 500 pages of script. And because of that, I remember that I wrote down many notes.
Because we were not only providing camera, but also lighting and grip. We've involved all staff each day of the shooting.
For us, it's very important to have a very good relationship because we're learning from them and they're learning from us. So it's we're giving and we're taking, and we try to bring their ideas onto set and also the opposite way.
Bo and I have a little bit of a history. We met first in film school and worked on a couple of films together. The first time that we actually had a work relationship was when he was the first AD on a short film of one of our fellow students, and I did the camera. And we realized then that we kind of like, well, are somehow a good match. We have the same taste for certain things and the same understanding for story or for story points. And that leads me to shoot his thesis film. And from there on, we did a couple of more feature films, and one step after the other, it leads to Dark at the end.
Nick went from our training ship into the HFF Munich, and then he met the people for filmmaking, and then suddenly he won a prize almost 8 years after he started, which was a great success for him. I saw that movie and I have still a CD or DVD of that.
I really appreciate a lot his approach to the image. He's one of the DOPs who is in the first place this modern creative artist, and then eventually brings in his excellent technical knowledge.
Bo told me very early on, once we've been sitting together talking about the style and the look of the show, that it is called Dark and that the show also has to be dark. From a story point, that certainly happens. So it was required that I also, contribute in the darkness of the whole show.
Season 1, you have very dark, cold, and rainy weather because it's autumn. And to work that out, you have to play with a lot of rain and creaky wood and wind, for example.
It's constantly raining, it's overcast, and also this plays into the interior sets when you just have the soft lights coming in and rain and miserable weather in front of the houses of the majority of the sets. There was also later on the 50s when the weather was a little bit different, but this was also to kind of like separate the different times. Over the course of the 3 seasons of Dark, we used quite a bit of LED light. It was less in the beginning and it was significantly more in the 3rd season. We used a lot of light mats, small LED lights that we just bounced around and created our moody scenes with these kind of lights. And we had sky panels for within the studio, just as overhead skylight. We just have a certain responsibility towards the environment, and this just a significant difference. The amount of power and energy is needed to firing up some Dino lights or just some warm 2Ks, 5Ks, 10Ks compared to the same amount of light intensity with LED lights. I think it's not only what we're doing, it's just like that it is a perfect picture. It's also there's just something behind it what we have to be aware of, So after I heard about the project, I wanted to find out about now the camera that I could use. So I had the opportunity to test an Alexa 65 versus an Alexa Plus. So I made these tests and got an understanding about the camera, about the advantage that it has, and about the how it renders pictures and how I could work with it. To find the best lenses that I wanted to work with, I kind of like asked Ari to just like bring everything on more or less. I went also back to the shelves of the lens room and just like took everything that was said, that isn't working as well. But it was very interesting to learn about how the camera is actually coming up with. And I had the opportunity to do it in the test room, with lighting. And also in the back of RA Munich, there is a little bit tiny kind of like bushes and a foresty type. And because a lot of dark would have taken place in a forest, there was a good opportunity to see how the shallow depths of field, or the way the depth of field fades out in the background, the bokeh, how it would look on foliage and branches and trunks and all these things, with a person in the foreground. On the very first test that I did, I had an intern who was helping me. We went outside, went to this little foresty behind Ari. And because it was an overcast and slightly raining day, he had a yellow raincoat, a yellow overcoat. Later on, when I showed Bo the test, and when he fell in love with the camera as well, he also saw him in this yellow coat. And quite a bit later, he told me that actually then was the decision made that Jonas should have had a yellow raincoat when he's walking into the forest. And this is now a very iconic item, obviously, of the show, this yellow raincoat. Yeah. There was a very nice coincidence that happened.
So the Ultra Primes turned out to have a rather large image circle, and they also have an area, obviously, they were calculated for Super 35. No one ever thought they would be used on a larger format. It's not been optically calculated from the manufacturer. They have very nice astigmatism and focus roll-off towards the edges, which made them very attractive for Nick.
And my preferred lens of all of them is the 65. I think the 65 and the portrait in a 65 is just gives you this nice, really medium format photography feeling when you have a Hasselblad with an 80mm lens and you just take a portrait of the nice fall off, the nice way the face is shaped. I just love this lens. So during the post-production of Dark, the grading parts especially, there was quite a change over the various seasons, from season 1 to then ultimately season 3, in terms of the look. So we have all these different characters travel through different or into different time periods. In season 1, I wanted to have one look, one show lot that I work on, and then everything that I want to change from there in terms of look, I would do through lighting and through the use of color in lighting. Also with discussions with Bo, the director, beforehand, was that we very subtle go into the different time periods. So this is how we work through the whole season. There's also the 50s, there's the 80s, and then there's some future part. And this is how we started. So I talked very early on to Steffen to create a show lot that would actually give me the look I had intended in all the pre-discussions with Bo beforehand, where we pulled a lot of screenshots of other films or looked at photography or paintings or just got an idea of how the look should be.
The beginning of the grading for season 1, I think we had like version 3 or something of that look that we liked, which was, I'd say, something relatively easygoing, no? Like very elegant, but not too old-fashioned, contemporary look with peachy skin tones and stone blue complementary colors. Not too contrasty, and I think we desaturated a little bit. But even though it's like 4 years old now, I think it's still a nice look.
We heard, and this is something also what you now suddenly have to think about it when you have an international show, what we didn't at the time, you're now making something for an international audience. Meaning what's clear for us maybe that the 80s and 2019 are clearly, you know, there's 33 years in between, and it's clearly two different periods. For someone in India or in South America or somewhere in Asia, it's maybe not as clear. So we had to, in order to serve the audience better, let alone that the story is kind of like complicated, and it doesn't really hurt if you have guidelines where you can just like, you know, so like a string where you know, okay, so the 80s look like this, the 2019 look like this, 50s like that.
When I saw it, it blew me out of the seat. It was unbelievable. I was so proud being involved in this shooting because the new look they created was very impressive. I loved it so much.
So for the second season, I was trying to get a streak idea to kind of like enhance some elements at least of the story. So we were trying all kind of streak filters.
Yeah, blue streak filters, several types.
Yeah.
Streak filters.
Everything that is available at the time, and we also tried a lot of stuff mounting behind the lenses.
Yeah, we tried fishing lines, several
fishing
types.
lines. Yeah, we sent off people to actually go to to a fishing shop not too far away from here to come with different sizes and different colors of fishing lines. Well, none of these really worked. You know, they were not thin enough. The streak that they created was just not what we were after, or what I was just like kind of understanding how this should be.
Then we created our own custom-made streak filter that hopefully gave you the flair you wanted. I think
we
after all this testing,
we created a flare filter, a streak filter.
Yeah.
Christoph made many filters. It was just painting on a filter. Each brush that he made on it had to be reproduced because we needed it on the A camera. On the B camera, we did it also for the second unit camera, so that they can individually shoot situations or film situations where is a streak filter required. So they all look slightly different, but I think at the end we came up with 6 nice kind of like matching or at the end close enough filters that were producing the flare that I wanted. Not too long to the sides, what is a problem of many streak filters, just some streak that ends somewhere and has a certain strength to it. Sometimes persistency is the key.
Yeah, sure.
I think I'm really happy with what how it is, you know, and how it looks.
And season 2 starts with the hottest summer you can imagine. So you have to build up a huge amount of insects and birds.
We had always sun coming into the places. It worked very well on these in the forest. Jonas running through the forest, or in the beginning when he arrives on these cornfields, you know, with two farmers finding him, and you see that the red is emphasized. It is on his neck where he was been hanging before, and the skin tone, and also his kind of like grayish pullover had a little blue in it. How it just like the blue separates, and then this is one of the definitely one of the nicest pictures we have. If this red and this eyes coming out, it's really beautiful. It's just such a different to the 2019, the 80s, the 50s, and the future. Having this extra in it, it just really makes the whole season very, very nice.
Yeah. I mean, being in the grading room with these guys is like also being preparing almost the next season. So they were constantly talking about lenses. So I came up with something not quite exactly as an anamorphic lens, but something like an anamorphic look. Involved a little bit of diffusion around the edges, some vignetting, a little bit chromatic aberration that we emphasized in order to give this period a bit of that blurry, old-fashioned feel.
So basically it was he took the picture apart and made a very clean picture provided from the Arri Alexa in a very nice way, with the nice fall off on the corners, and kind of like, you know, made it old-fashioned. So it was, everything was done in post. For the third season, where the whole story involves even more, and more people are traveling. So again, I went and looked at what is new and available for us in terms of lenses, and again trying to see if there's anything available within the anamorphic range of lenses that can be put on this type of sensor.
So the Senior Vision lenses gave him optically the look that he wanted. He wanted to have the strong anamorphic look with a lot of aberrations in the edges and also in the bokeh. The problem was the Senior Vision didn't all cover that format. So what we had to do for him, we had to extend the image circle on some of the lenses.
After you did this, there were also a couple of challenges coming with the thing, because they are old glass and because there are now, or have to cover, a larger area that they actually calculated for. The usual top and bottom out of focus area that is like eminent on very many anamorphic lenses, especially the old ones. The newer ones are different calculated, but the older ones always have this kind of like top and bottom out of focus areas. Also the edges, you know, there's just like bending edges and things. And on top, that the camera assistants, they really hated these lenses because they couldn't really see on their monitors actually what is in focus and what is not in focus. So they were always kind of like a little bit questioning whether they nailed it or they didn't. Fortunately, again, we had like two wonderful colleagues, you know, Lars Richter and Won Suk Pak. They're just like perfect camera assistants who just like feeling and breathing focus. The third season came out, again with the experience and what we learned from second season. The story got even more complex, you know. So instead of having 5 looks that we used to have in season 2, we're now facing 10 looks actually for season 3. For example, now we're traveling into 1888.
There's pictures that I came across on the internet. I think England in Color or something it was called, and it's Old photography made with the help of one of the earliest, if not the earliest, color process called autochrome. I didn't try to replicate it, but I tried to use it as an inspiration, so that was helpful.
I remember that I had this on the first day. We've been in Martha's chamber, let's say, and I remember that everything looks just very perfect, but the skin tones just have been a little bit too red. Not that it looked bad, but it just wasn't looking right. So something was off. So we dialed back on this red peak in it. I think there's also the interesting part, the look that is established at the very end of the show. It's a more colorful look and also contrasty, but certainly more colorful and warmer in a way. If you look at the whole body of Dark, you see that it fits totally into it and separating, but also coming together and holding everything together. So that was the great opportunity to do this. I don't think that you have it on any other project this same way, you know, that you can play around so crazily.
Yeah, after 3 seasons, depressing and slightly desaturated, it feels really like coming home to introduce a little bit of color and to have an ending that is sort of very satisfying in a way. And yeah, I like it very much.
Es regnet draußen. Ist das alles, was du dazu zu sagen hast?
I experimented with, again, synthetic winds and drones, for example. But it took me a while to realize that we had to rebuild our symbiosis out of season 1 and 2, but reduce organic elements and build a synthetic opposite of it. I also remember that Bo wanted to hear the B word like in a bubble.
One thing with having so many different looks is it is a challenging project. Dark is anyway, because of the story, but because of the many, many different periods that you have in, you have to be very prepared to know that now is this time, this is this time, that is this time. But on top of all this, usually each episode takes 1 day. So we have always morning, we have at one point midday, let's say, and then there's usually it goes into the night. This is, as far as I can remember now, is not happening on one episode. All the other episodes are working like this. The other thing is you have to be really careful what time of day it is. So you have to kind of like understand, so are lights on, are lights off, where is this, you know, is it morning, is it evening, and not only you have to be aware of this, but it's also like the second unit, knowing, giving them the time of the day so that they know this happened before, this happens after, stay with your lighting in this, it needs to be dawn or whatever. So that's also very challenging to establish this.
Scheiße. Was ist in der Höhle? Was ist das? Ach du Scheiße. Fuck, was ist hier los? Fuck, was passiert hier? Los, lauf! Was mit dem Lappen? Kilian! Los! Was mit dem scheiß Lappen? Weg hier! Martha! Weg hier! Martha, komm! Weg hier! Komm, Martha! Renn! Renn!
My relationship with Nick definitely developed over the years, based obviously on lots of trust and knowledge and mutual respect. And this trust I was able to give forward or put forward to the camera department. The whole process was a mutual giving and taking. So it was wonderful for everyone.
Just like that, just like that. Forever's never gone so fast.